going to talk, Lynn is going to speak first and then I'm going to speak afterwards. We're going to primarily look at some of the problems around evaluation and monitoring in this space, especially when it comes to education programmes. And then I'm going to look at, or give a brief overview of some of the programmes that we've been running here in London and how we've evaluated those alongside a very supportive external evaluator. Really briefly on Connect Futures, we're an organisation based in Birmingham that run education intervention to prevent violent extremism, serious youth violence, support sort of anti-racist processes in education institutions primarily. We work mostly with young people, but a lot of the time with professionals as well. We're going to be talking today mostly about working with young people. I know there was a talk yesterday on the importance of working with children and the threats that children face, so hopefully there's some crossover between those two topics. I'll stop talking because I love to talk and I need to save it until the end. Lynn knows very well, and I'll hand over to Lynn. I can do the clicker if you'd like, Lynn. Can you see that okay?
Just about that. Yeah. Good morning, everybody, and again, thank you for coming, and it's great to see so many people at 9 o'clock in the morning. I can't believe this. We're going to do, if you like, bad news, good news. I want to very briefly rehearse some of the issues about what's special about trying to monitor interventions in extremism in context of fragility and violence. I suppose, yeah, decades of research in various parts of the world. And I don't need to underline the complexity of that when you're trying to not just introduce programs and doing work with young people or professionals, but the complexities of evaluation and the volatility in terms of impact. You've got hugely unreliable data, but one of the key things for me is always the fact that you're dealing with people. I know that sounds a truism, but it's not just about participants and respondents and lists of people that have turned up to things and filled in the questionnaires. Everybody has got an agenda. They've got an agenda for being there in some sort of intervention or workshop. They've got an agenda even when they fill in the questionnaires or respond to the interviews. What's in it for them? And we always have to think about why they're doing things. Why do they say the things that they're saying? What are they trying to achieve by presenting some sort of image? Recollection always of doing a workshop with a head, and I said, how was the workshop? Oh, excellent, he said, absolutely excellent. I learnt a lot. What did you change as a result of going to this workshop? And he couldn't think of anything that he was going to change. And I think you'll come back to that about, we've now built that, well, we'd always build that into the workshop evaluations. What will you do as a result of being here? You know, dealing with very uncomfortable data, I think Eileen mentioned, you know, the issues of tricky things. It's not just media, but what language you're using. Suggesting of doing some stuff in Somalia around radicalisation, extremism. I'm told, no, don't actually even mention those words, because if Al-Shabaab hear that you're trying to do something against radicalisation, they will interpret that as being anti-Al-Shabaab, and, you know, forget that. So you always got to be very gentle about how even the language you use. So, as you know, in many countries, you're not actually talking about radicalisation, extremism, you're talking about peace, education, social cohesion, always being careful about that. So there's all sorts of issues where I don't need to go into that. How am I doing for time? Right, okay. Next one.
Plenty of time.
10 seconds.
Plenty of time.
All right, plenty of time. The usual thing around people's ideas of success and mixing up targets and outcomes. And I had great hassles with people in Sri Lanka when I was doing some work on social cohesion, and they were very thrilled, and they said 70% of people, you know, students showed an impact. And I said, well, what about the other 30%? What are they doing? Well, no, 70%, you know, and it's trying to say, what do these figures actually mean, if anything? You know, was improvement due to something else apart from the intervention that you're doing? Was a change in attitude due to something else? And Eileen mentioned the whole thing. So I'm looking over there, but she was there. Eileen mentioned the thing around causality and correlation and all those sorts of issues.
Next.
Yes, why not? Being workshopped. again, talking with the head about, what they were doing. And he said, we're not doing anything on that because I haven't been workshopped on that. So this idea that you cannot move now until you've been workshopped. And so it's thinking about the long-term issues of you're doing an intervention, you evaluated it, and that people have been very positive about it. But will it carry on? Training doesn't equal learning. You can be trained, but you don't necessarily learn anything. Learning doesn't necessarily mean behaviour change. These are obvious things, but I always think it's worth rehearsing. And individual behaviour change doesn't necessarily mean institutional change. And if you take somebody out of an institution, returning a changed person to an unchanged institution is probably worse than useless. Everything's got to be holistic. And this is why, again, we work so much with whole schools, parents, community, not just working with the young people themselves. Really crucial. Okay. I'm summing up so far. I think these are obvious things. What are we looking at when we're trying to do evaluations? Pre-experience. What are people bringing to this? Do we know what they're bringing to this? We can find out from evaluations, what are they expecting from some sort of workshop or intervention that you're doing? But what is their experience? How will we ever know what they're bringing to what we're providing? Are they, and we're talking about young people who are in gangs and violence and not just adverse experiences. How do teachers use whatever we're providing in terms of resources? We have no way of knowing. We always give resources after the things that we do, but we don't know how teachers use them. How can we say that this has been successful? So the post context is absolutely crucial, and the geographical context as well. Can't read that. What am I saying? Survey. Whether surveys, yeah.
Overcome correlation.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. I think I finished. No,
Right.
yeah, just one word about politics. Politics are very important, not just the politics of an intervention, but the politics surrounding what people bring, what they're scared of, what they fear. They won't sign a form of ethical responsibility. They don't want to know. They don't want anyone going near why they've been there and with their names on anything. So the politics are really, really broad and very wide, and it's not just about political parties or media attention. It's the culture of fear that people may live within when you're doing controversial issues. Okay, I've done.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Can you hear me okay, everyone? Good. So I'm going to talk a little bit now and reflect on some of the things that Lynn has said in the first half of the session, specifically reflecting on them in relation to an intervention that we've been delivering in London over the past few years. And the intervention is primarily focusing on the undermining of the harm caused by mis and disinformation. It's called Fake News, Extremism and Truth, and we run it with children and young people across the UK, but in London we've done it here with young people who we talk about having sort of high or complex support needs, and this can look like lots of different things, but primarily these are autistic young people that we're talking to about these issues: fake news, misinformation, disinformation, extremism and truth. So I'm going to give you a quick kind of whistle-stop tour of this and some of the evaluation outcomes, or some of the outcomes from the evaluation that we've done on this programme so far. I should say that this programme that we're working on has a really positive and supportive evaluation external partner. When we're working on other projects, the evaluation or the outcome information that's required from our funders is often less than what this partner is looking for. So we ran it across 4 sites. This is from a couple of years ago now. So we ran it across 4 sites in London, specifically different London boroughs, and it's a programme of learning, right? So we go back once every week for 4 weeks to develop relationships with the young people and to really get into the issues of mis and disinformation, online extremism, how it takes form, this sort of thing. And as I've said, we're working with a very supportive external partner who is looking for things that are not just quantitative outcome information, although they are interested in that as well. So they're helping us to conduct kind of impact and change analysis via surveys, as well as qualitative data information. So it went really well. We surveyed, our sample of young people was around 150 young people, so relatively big sample. And there's some really excellent stats here, but if we think to even just 2 minutes ago when Lynn was talking, there are lots of questions to ask about these stats, right? So I could say, hey, look, we've solved the problem. Young people in London know what misinformation is, and it's no longer an issue, and off we go, and we can all go home and leave this conference and go and explore Westminster. That's not at all the case, right? So although 90% of our participants might better understand misinformation according to the surveys that they filled in, or 85% of the participants were more likely to report fake news if they spotted it, and that 90% of the participants felt confident they could identify trustworthy people in their lives. This is doing lots of good things. It's saying that their knowledge has increased, that their intent has increased, and that their support systems have got better. But there's so many questions to ask about that. What is fake news according to young people? What is misinformation according to young people? How do we know that they're reporting the sort of misinformation that we're hoping that they would? How do we know that their teachers know what they're talking about, that what mis and disinformation is? So if they're saying that they trust their teachers, does that mean that their teachers understand this complex issue as much as we'd hope them to? So it might be the whole truth, but is it nothing but the truth? I'm trying to do some courtroom drama to keep us awake at 9 a.m. The data is good. I'm not saying that it's not good. It's great, but it doesn't tell us the whole story. There's far, far more to learn for the sake of programme improvement in what is not said in our outcome quantitative data. As Lynn said, all of those questions are very, very important. But when we receive results from quantitative data evaluation, we want to ask questions about, okay, so what's this not saying? What is there to learn in what's not being said in this data? And there's lots of sort of issues with the sort of gathering of this data. The participants were only a sample. So as Lynn said, what were the other 300 young people that we worked with saying about this project? We have no evidence that the young people who filled those surveys in came to the whole project. So how do we decide if those improvements are down to us or not? Some of the young people had very high complex needs, and so couldn't access the surveys in the way that we hoped. So the language even wasn't accessible. That's something that we had to change. And very, very critically, there was no involvement from the young people in the evaluation development, in the methods of the evaluation. So with the support of the funder, we did a lot more evidence gathering, and this is really, I think, best practice in this space. It doesn't happen all the time. We conducted qualitative semi-formal interviews with practitioners who worked with those young people, did lots of interviews and feedback with our trainers, as well as interviews with the youth participants. And we learned lots of really, really important things that helped us to design and change the programme over time. Learning needs to be scaffolded. We can't just talk about critical thinking with young people and assume that they know what we're talking about. We have to tailor and differentiate our programme design to the needs of our young people. All very, very simple stuff, but this came out in the qualitative data gathering. Really critically, we found out that young people were kind of scared of the stuff we were talking about, so we absolutely had to change how we spoke about it. There was this really interesting thing that happened as well, where young people said, look, we know that the world is surrounded by fake news. We know that information is disordered, and we know that there's lots of stuff out there that might not be true. But what we actually don't know is how to locate hate and violence within that information. That's the stuff we need help with. Yes, we know that the world is full of misinformation. Help us understand where it's dangerous. I will stop talking quickly. I did say I like to talk. In terms of in terms of evaluation, it's not just about the design. We had to do loads of process improvements. So this is quite a costly activity. It's not just about designing forms and doing interviews. We had to change full organisational approaches, change how we do our booking forms, train all of our staff, create digital solutions, completely redesign our data management systems, as well as safeguarding policies. So it's not just about when we're doing evaluation that we're just thinking about the evaluation process itself, although that is very important. And when we're working with young people, we try really hard to use youth-led evaluation methodologies, things like peer-to-peer activities, getting the young people to interview each other to talk about their experiences, create videos of their experiences, that sort of thing. Activities for young people to develop their own indicators. So we're not going in and saying, hey, we want to know if you understand fake news. They're saying, no, actually, we want to understand hate and violence. As well as things like visual aids, I talk about this quite a lot, putting a picture of a mountain up, and the young people can design their own little characters and move themselves up and down the mountain depending on how confident and happy they are with the topic that we're talking about that day. Interactive youth methodologies to engage the young people throughout the programme and not just in that session. Really quickly, I promise I'll stop now, is some recommendations. This is really, we beg for this all the time. We need more money in evaluation spaces. Eileen made the really good point that we absolutely have time to do it, but we don't always have a resource to do it. The staff and the time costs money as well. I also think it's really important that CSOs are trained in evaluation methods, and this isn't just in, how to write and collect surveys. It's about how to analyse the data that comes from those things, especially quantitative data. Data analysis training for community service organisations is very important. Not everyone knows how to do it. Building a culture of evaluation in funding spaces, replicating best practice, for example, the Shared Endeavour Fund, which is actually who we worked with on this project, and then developing responsive evaluation programmes. So the riots in the UK over the summer meant that we've developed content and curriculum related to this, and we're also evaluating this in a responsive way as well. We can't just, it's not enough to only evaluate your long-term programme, we have to evaluate everything. Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, I went over.